William Elliot stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his home office, watching the last rays of sunlight paint the manicured lawns of his Tudor mansion in deep amber hues. At 55, he cut an imposing figure 6'2", with salt-and-pepper hair and eyes that could strip away pretense from any business deal. His fingers traced the cool glass, following the outline of the property that housed 20 years of memories, most of them now tainted. "Mr. Elliot, the Anderson contract is ready for your review." His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Send it through, Sarah," he replied, turning to the sleek mahogany desk that had witnessed his rise from a struggling real estate developer to the CEO of a $200 million empire. The leather chair creaked softly as he settled in, his mind already processing the complex details of the upcoming development project. From somewhere in the house, Jackie's laughter floated up, that practiced, society wife laugh she perfected over their years together. Will's jaw tightened imperceptibly. She would be entertaining her usual circle of Greenwich socialites, playing the role of the perfect wife and mother with practiced ease. The door opened, and Anthony, his eldest at 21, stepped in. "Dad, got a minute?" Will's expression softened slightly. "For you always. What's on your mind?" Anthony ran a hand through his dark Hira gesture, so familiar it made Will's chest tighten. How many times had he wondered about these small inheritances, these ghostly echoes of another man's genetics? "I've been thinking about joining the company after graduation," Anthony said, settling into one of the visitor chairs. "I know you always said it was my choice, but you're worried about living up to expectations?" Will completed the thought, studying his son's face. Despite what he now knew about Anthony's biological origins, he couldn't help but see shadows of himself in the young man's determination. "Something like that," Anthony admitted. "Mom keeps saying I should consider law school instead. She thinks with Aunt Loretta's connections, your mother and aunt don't run this company." Will cut in, his tone firm but not unkind. "If you want to learn the business, you'll start from the ground up. No shortcuts, no special treatment. Think you can handle that?" Anthony's face broke into a genuine smile. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say." The moment was interrupted by more laughter from downstairs, followed by the twins, Daniel and David, thundering past the office door, likely headed to the game room. At 19, they were bundles of endless energy, star athletes at their respective colleges. "I should go finish my thesis research." Anthony stood, then hesitated. "Dad? Thanks. For everything." Will nodded, watching his eldest son leave. The interaction left a bitter taste in his mouth, not because of Anthony, but because of what he'd discovered about Jackie's elaborate deception. Each child had been a calculated move in her long game. Each pregnancy, a carefully orchestrated performance designed to secure another piece of property. He remembered each gift clearly. The brownstone in Manhattan after Anthony was born. The waterfront property in Rhode Island for the twins. The vineyard in the Hamptons following Emma's arrival. And finally, the ski lodge in Vermont when Michael completed their family. Or rather, when Michael completed Jackie's scheme. A knock at his door pulled him from his thoughts. "Come in." Emma, his 17-year-old daughter, poked her head in. "Daddy? Mom's having some of her friends over for dinner. She wants to know if you'll be joining them." Will checked his watch. 7:30 p.m. "Not tonight, princess. I have some work to finish here." Emma's face fell slightly. "Dr. Thompson will be there. Mom says he's bringing those French wines you like." Will's expression remained neutral, even as his blood turned to ice. Mark Thompson, the gynecologist who had been playing happy families with his wife for the past 2 decades. "Another time, perhaps. Don't let me keep you." After Emma left, Will pulled up the security feeds on his computer. The camera overlooking the formal dining room showed Jackie holding court at the head of the table, radiant in a navy cocktail dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. At 45, she was still strikingly beautiful, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her movements graceful and deliberate. Mark Thompson sat 3 seats down, maintaining a practice distance that would appear completely professional to any observer. Will had reviewed hundreds of hours of security footage over the past weeks, noting the subtle glances, the carefully orchestrated accidental touches, the way Jackie's body language changed whenever Mark was present. The feed from the kitchen showed Loretta, helping the staff arrange dessert plates. His sister-in-law's presence at family functions had never seemed unusual. She had always played the role of the devoted aunt, the trusted family attorney who handled their extensive property portfolio. Now, watching her efficient movements and knowing smile, Will saw her for what she was, an accomplice in his wife's elaborate fraud. His phone buzzed with a text from his private investigator. Additional footage from 2003 to 2005 confirms pattern. Thompson's visits coincide with all your documented business trips. Sending full report tonight. We'll close the security feeds and opened his safe, removing a thick file of documents he'd compiled over the past month. Property deeds, transfer records, medical records obtained through less than legal means, all pieces of a puzzle he'd never known he needed to solve until that night 2 weeks ago. The memory of Jackie's conversation with Loretta in the sunroom played through his mind again. All 5 pregnancies were planned with Mark, Jackie had said, her voice carrying that note of triumph that had first caught his attention. Each time I told while I was pregnant, he added another property in my name. The fertility clinic made it easy. Mark's sample instead of Will's. Once Michael graduates, I'll take everything in divorce and live with my real family. Loretta's response had been equally damning. The property transfers are ironclad. I made sure we'll sign everything over completely. Mark's kids will inherit millions, and that fool won't suspect until it's too late. A soft knock interrupted his dark thoughts. Michael, his youngest at 15, stood in the doorway. Dad, can you help me with my economics homework? Will gestured to the chair beside his desk. Show me what you're working on. As Michael spread his textbook and notes across the desk, Will studied his youngest son's profile. The boy had Jackie's coloring, but none of her calculation. There was an earnestness to Michael that made Will's chest ache. It's about market manipulation, Michael explained, pointing to a problem in his textbook. I don't quite understand how someone can make money by deliberately misleading investors. Will's laugh held no humor. Sometimes, son, the best lessons about deception come from real life. Let me explain it to you. Later that night, after the dinner party had wound down and the house had grown quiet, Will made his way to the sunroom. The space held some of Jackie's most prized possessions: antique furniture, original artwork, and photos of their perfect family arranged just so. He picked up a frame containing a recent holiday photo, all 7 of them smiling at the camera, the picture of domestic bliss. Still working? Jackie's voice drifted in from the doorway. She'd changed into silk pajamas, her face freshly scrubbed of makeup, but still beautiful. Just thinking, Will replied, replacing the photo carefully. Jackie moved closer, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. Her perfume, something expensive and French, enveloped him. You work too hard, darling. Come to bed. Will gently disentangled himself. I have a few calls to make. Asian markets are opening soon. A flash of annoyance crossed Jackie's face, quickly masked. Don't stay up too late. We have brunch with the Hendersons tomorrow. Mark and Caroline will be there. Of course they will, Will murmured, watching his wife glide away. He waited until her footsteps faded before pulling out his phone and dialing a number he'd memorized days ago. Winters, a gruff voice answered on the second ring. Benjamin, it's Will Elliott. About that situation we discussed, him ready to move forward. How soon can you prepare the documents? Benjamin Winters, known in legal circles as the lawyer you hired when you needed someone destroyed legally, didn't hesitate. Give me 48 hours. You're sure about this? Will's gaze fell on another family photo, this one showing Jackie, surrounded by their children, at Emma's Sweet 16. His wife's smile held a secret he now understood too well. Completely sure. They've had 20 years to perfect their scheme. I won't need nearly that long to dismantle it. After ending the call, we'll spend another hour reviewing security footage from previous years. He watched Jackie and Mark's careful dance of deception played out across countless social gatherings, medical appointments, and chance encounters. He saw Loretta's frequent visits, ostensibly to discuss property matters, now clearly part of their long-term strategy. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck midnight as Will finally shut down his computer. The house was silent now, save for the distant hum of the climate control system that kept Jackie's precious artwork at optimal temperature. In their bedroom, Jackie was already asleep, her breathing deep and even. Will stood in the doorway for a long moment, remembering the young woman he'd fallen in love with, wondering if she'd ever existed at all, or if every moment had been calculated, every smile measured, every kiss a down payment on her next property acquisition. He moved to his dressing room, selecting a suit for tomorrow's brunch. The Hendersons' events were always formal affairs, and appearances had to be maintained. As he hung the suit on the door, his phone buzzed to get another update from his investigator. Found something interesting in Thompson's medical records. Seems he's been playing this game with other patients. You're not the only one. Will's fingers tightened on the phone. So Mark Thompson's practice of helping wealthy women conceive children with him went beyond Jackie. It wasn't just a love affair gone too far, it was a pattern, a business model built on betrayal. The pieces were falling into place now. Tomorrow, he would sit across from Mark Thompson at brunch, raise a glass of champagne, and smile while Benjamin Winters set the wheels of destruction in motion. Jackie and Loretta thought they had spent 20 years building an unassailable fortress of legal documents and property transfers. They were about to learn that no fortress was truly impregnable, not when you had the right tools and the patience to use them. Will changed for bed, his movements deliberate and quiet. Jackie stirred slightly as he slipped under the covers but didn't wake. In the darkness, he allowed himself a small smile. Let them think they had one. Let them believe their scheme was perfect, their future secure. After all, the best counterattacks were the ones your opponents never saw coming until it was too late. Tomorrow would be just another Sunday brunch in Greenwich, Connecticut. The sun would shine, champagne would flow, and the wealthy would play their social games. But beneath the surface, the countdown to Jackie's carefully constructed world's collapse would begin. Will closed his eyes, his mind already mapping out the moves ahead. He had built his empire from nothing once before. He could do it again, but this time, he would make sure the foundation was built on truth, not deception. The last thought that crossed his mind before sleep claimed him was of his children, 5 innocent players in their mother's game of greed and manipulation. They would be protected, their future secured, even if it meant burning everything else to the ground. In her sleep, Jackie murmured something and turned away from him. Will remained still, knowing that soon enough, her dreams of wealth and property would turn to nightmares. But for now, he would let her sleep, let her believe in the perfection of her scheme. Morning would come soon enough. Benjamin Winters' corner office on the 48th floor of a Manhattan high-rise served as command central for what would become the most intricate legal dismantling of his career. The early morning sun cast long shadows across stacks of documents, financial records, and medical files spread across his mahogany conference table. Will Elliot sat opposite him, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp as he reviewed the evidence they'd gathered over the past week. Your sister-in-law made 3 critical errors, Winters said, spreading out a series of property documents. First, she represented both parties in multiple transactions without proper disclosure. Second, she altered documents after your signature was in place. And third, he smiled, the expression reminiscent of a shark scenting blood. She forgot to check the original deed restrictions from your grandfather's estate. Will raised an eyebrow. Explain? The original properties came with a hereditary clause. Any transfer must benefit direct biological descendants. Winters tapped a yellow document. Loretta built her entire house of cards on the assumption that your children were your biological heirs. The moment we can prove they're not, the transfers become void, Will finished. Better than void. They become fraudulent. Every property Jackie acquired through her pregnancies can be reclaimed and redistributed through a properly structured trust. Winters pulled out a thick legal document. Which is where this comes in? We'll study the trust agreement. The structure was elegant in its simplicity, a steel trap disguised as a safety net. Timeline? We can execute it tonight, but there's more. Winters pressed a button on his intercom. Send in Ms. Chun. A sharp-featured woman in her 40s entered, carrying a laptop. Mr. Elliott, I'm Sandra Chun from the State Medical Board's Investigation Unit. What we've uncovered about Dr. Thompson's practice is disturbing. She opened her laptop, displaying a spreadsheet. Over the past 20 years, Dr. Thompson has performed fertility treatments on 38 wealthy women. In each case, the same pattern emerges: unexpected sample mix-ups that resulted in pregnancies. The children's DNA rarely matches either the intended father or Thompson himself. Will's expression hardened. He's been running a systematic fraud operation. Worse, Sandra continued. He's been charging premium rates for these special arrangements while using random donor samples. The women believe they're carrying either their husband's child or, in some cases, Thompson's. In reality, he's been cutting corners with unlabeled samples to maximize profits. Winters interjected. We got signed statements from 3 former nurses. They detail everything: the substitutions, the cover-ups, the coded language used to identify special patients. Will absorb this information, his mind already calculating the implications. Jackie believes all 5 children are Thompson's. DNA tests confirm otherwise, Sandra said quietly. We've processed the samples you provided. None of your children share genetic markers with either you or Dr. Thompson. Each appears to come from a different donor. The room fell silent as the full weight of this revelation settled. Will's children, all 5 of them, were strangers twice over. Not his, but not Thompson's either. Does Thompson know? Will asked. Not yet, Winters replied. But he's panicking. After our records request, he's been making calls to offshore accounts, trying to move assets. Will stood, moving to the window. Below, Manhattan buzzed with morning activity, oblivious to the drama unfolding above. Start the proceedings. The next 48 hours moved with precision. Will's team executed a carefully choreographed series of legal and investigative maneuvers while maintaining absolute secrecy. By Wednesday morning, the pieces were in place. Will sat in his home office, reviewing the final DNA reports. Each child's genetic profile told a different story: 5 distinct donors, none matching Thompson or himself. The fertility clinic's records showed systematic mishandling of samples, with Thompson's signature on every authorization. His phone buzzed a text from Jackie. Dinner at the Hendersons tonight? Mark says he has exciting news about the fertility clinic's expansion. Will's reply was brief. Working late. Minutes later, his phone rang Loretta. He let it go to voicemail, then played her message. Will, we need to discuss these property transfers immediately. There are some irregularities that require attention. Call me as soon as possible. He deleted the message, then opened a secure email from his private investigator. Attached were surveillance photos showing Loretta entering Thompson's office after hours, carrying thick folders of documents. The timestamps matched dates when both Will and Jackie were traveling. A knock at his office door interrupted his thoughts. Anthony stood there looking troubled. Dad, got a minute? Come in. Will gestured to a chair. What's on your mind? I overheard Mom and Aunt Loretta talking about the Hamptons property. Something about urgent transfers and paperwork that needs to be filed. Anthony shifted uncomfortably. Is everything okay with you and Mom? Will studied his eldest son's face, the features he'd once tried to match to his own, now understanding why they never quite fit. Anthony, I want you to know that whatever happens in the coming days, your future is secure. I've made sure of it. Dad, I don't care about properties or money. I care about our family. So do I. Will's voice was firm. More than you know. After Anthony left, Will made another call to Winters. Status? Medical board investigators are reviewing Thompson's records now. We've identified 12 other cases with similar patterns. The DNA results are consistent random donors, not Thompson's sample as promised. And the trust documents? Ready for execution. The moment we file, every property transfer since Anthony's birth becomes contestable. Loretta's manipulation of the documents gives us grounds for immediate recovery. Will ended the call and opened his safe, removing 5 sealed envelopes. Each contained a birth certificate, DNA results, and a complete timeline of Thompson's deception. The truth would hurt his children, there was no avoiding that. But the trust would protect them, ensure their futures regardless of biology. That evening, the house hummed with typical activity. The twins, Daniel and David, argued over basketball scores in the game room. Emma practiced piano in the conservatory. Michael worked on homework in the kitchen. Jackie was out, presumably at tennis, but actually at Thompson's penthouse, according to the tracker Will had placed on her car. Will moved through the house, memorizing details he'd taken for granted for 20 years. The family photos on the walls told a story of perfect domestic harmony, all lies. carefully curated by Jackie and preserved by Loretta's legal maneuvering. His phone buzzed again, updates from his team. Medical board officially opening investigation into Thompson's practice. 3 more nurses coming forward with statements. Offshore accounts traced to Thompson's alias discovered. Trust documents certified and ready for filing. Will packed a small bag, including only essentials and documents. In Jackie's room, he placed the 5 envelopes on her pillow, arranged in age order Anthony to Michael. The note he left was simple. The truth has many properties. The DNA results would shatter every assumption Jackie had built her scheme upon. Not only were the children not Will's, but they weren't Thompson's either. Her 20-year plan to secure properties through strategic pregnancies had been undermined by Thompson's own greed and corner-cutting. Will moved silently through the house one last time. In the game room, the twins had fallen asleep watching TV. He adjusted a blanket over them, remembering countless similar moments that still meant something, regardless of DNA. Emma's light was still on. He found her reading in bed. Heading out for a late meeting, she asked. Something like that, Will replied. Remember what I told you about family being more than blood? Emma nodded, looking puzzled. Hold on to that thought in the coming days, he said softly. Good night, princess. Michael was last, still at the kitchen table with his economics homework. We'll spend a few minutes helping him understand market volatility, an ironic lesson, given what was about to happen to their family's carefully constructed facade. At midnight, we'll send a final text to Winters. Execute everything. Within minutes, a cascade of legal mechanisms activated. Trust documents filed electronically. Medical board receiving formal complaints. Property transfer challenges initiated. Evidence packages delivered to regulatory authorities. Will drove away from the Tudor mansion for the last time, knowing what tomorrow would bring. Jackie would wake to find the truth laid bare: her lover's deception, her sister's fraud, and the hollow core of her 20-year scheme exposed. The children would return from their various activities to find their mother in crisis, their comfortable assumptions about parentage shattered, and their father gone. But they would also find their future secured, protected by a trust designed to support them regardless of biology. Will had built his empire once from nothing. He could do it again, but first justice needed to take its course. Let Jackie, Mark, and Loretta face the consequences of their choices. Let the truth, like the properties they had schemed so long to acquire, finally come to light. The security gates closed behind his car with a soft click. In the rearview mirror, the mansion's lights winked out one by one. The game was over. Jackie, Mark, and Loretta just didn't know it yet. But soon they would. Very soon indeed. The next morning dawned clear and bright. As Will's children went about their regular routines, Anthony to his internship, the twins to basketball practice, Emma to school, and Michael to his tutoring session, they had no idea their world was about to change forever. Jackie woke late, her usual routine disrupted by a sleepless night spent worrying about Thompson's increasingly erratic calls about medical record requests. She found the envelopes on her pillow at 10:23 a.m. Security cameras would later capture her progressive collapse as she opened each one, understanding too late the fatal flaw in her careful plans. By noon, the children began returning home, drawn by increasingly hysterical calls from their mother. They found Jackie in the master bedroom, surrounded by scattered papers, her perfect composure shattered by revelations she never saw coming. The truth had indeed come home to roost, and it had many properties, none of which belonged to Jackie anymore. The state medical board's conference room buzzed with tension as the evidence against Dr. Mark Thompson mounted. Spread across the mahogany table were patient files, falsified records, and sworn statements from former staff members. Each document added another nail to the coffin of his once prestigious practice. Dr. Thompson, the board chairman's voice cut through the silence. These allegations are unprecedented in their scope and severity. Thompson's carefully maintained facade of professional dignity had cracked. His designer's suit looked rumpled, his usual confidence replaced by barely concealed panic. This is a witch hunt. These women knew exactly what they were. Careful, doctor, his attorney warned quietly. But Thompson continued, his voice rising. I provided a service. These society-wise wanted. What these women wanted, the chairman interrupted, was ethical medical care. Instead, you conducted unauthorized procedures, mishandled genetic material, and engaged in systematic fraud. The evidence was damning. 38 cases of deliberate sample substitution, falsified consent forms, offshore accounts linked to special handling fees, and now, former nurses stepping forward with detailed accounts of his methodology. Your license is suspended pending full investigation, the chairman announced. The board will reconvene in 30 days for final determination. As Thompson left the hearing room, reporters swarmed. Camera flashes captured his fall from grace in stark bursts of light. Dr. Thompson, is it true you ran a paternity fraud scheme? Were your wealthy patients aware their children's biological fathers were random donors? How many families have been affected by your fertility clinic fraud? His only response was a snarl as he pushed through the crowd. Across town, in the Connecticut Bar Association's Ethics Committee chamber, Loretta Elliott faced her own reckoning. The disciplinary panel had spent hours reviewing evidence of her legal malpractice. Ms. Elliott, the committee head stated, you represented both parties in multiple property transfers without disclosure. You altered documents post-signature. You violated attorney-client privilege repeatedly. Loretta's perfectly manicured nails dug into her palms. I was protecting my sister's interests. You were facilitating fraud, came the sharp reply. The evidence shows a pattern of deliberate deception spanning 2 decades. The panel's decision was unanimous. Immediate suspension pending disbarment proceedings. As Loretta gathered her belongings, her phone buzzed with messages from panicked clients questioning their own property transfers. Meanwhile, Jackie Elliott sat in her empty Tudor mansion, surrounded by the wreckage of her careful plans. Her attempts to access the properties had been blocked at every turn. Will's trust structure was impenetrable, its conditions crystal clear. Each property would be held for the children, accessible only after DNA verification and strict ethical compliance requirements. Her phone rang Mark Thompson's number. She let it go to voicemail, then played his message. You manipulative bitch. His voice was razor-sharp with fury. You knew about the sample mix-ups. You knew those children weren't mine. You used me to build your property portfolio, and now my entire practice is destroyed. Don't contact me again. My lawyers will be in touch. Jackie deleted the message, her hands shaking. Everything was unraveling. The properties she'd schemed for 20 years to acquire were beyond her reach. Her lover had turned against her. Her sister's legal expertise had proven worthless against Will's meticulous planning. The doorbell rang. Anthony stood there, his expression hard. We need to talk, Mother. Behind him were the twins, Daniel and David, their usual playful demeanor replaced by cold anger. Emma and Michael lingered in the background, their young faces showing confusion and hurt. How could you? Anthony's voice trembled with controlled rage. 20 years of lies. Using us as pawns in your property scheme. You don't understand, Jackie began, but David cut her off. We understand perfectly. Dad showed us everything, the fertility clinic records, the property transfers, your plans for divorce once Michael graduated. The DNA tests, Daniel added quietly. We know we're not Dad's or Dr. Thompson's. Emma stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. Did you ever love us? Or were we just down payments on real estate? Jackie reached for her daughter, but Emma recoiled. Of course I love you. Everything I did was to secure your future. No, Michael, usually the quietest, spoke up. Everything you did was to secure properties. Dad's the one who secured our future. The trust he created protects us. Not you. Where is your father? Jackie demanded. He had no right to. He had every right. Anthony's voice was ice. He's been more of a parent than you ever were. And he's not even our biological father. The children left, one by one, leaving Jackie alone in the mansion that had once symbolized her triumph. Now it felt like a mausoleum for her dead dreams. Weeks passed. The medical board's final hearing was brutal. More patients came forward, each testimony driving another nail into Thompson's professional coffin. His license was revoked permanently, and criminal charges for medical fraud followed. Loretta's disbarment proceedings moved swiftly. Former clients filed malpractice suits as her pattern of ethical violations came to light. Her carefully built legal career ended not with a bang, but with the quiet signing of documents accepting disbarment. 1 year later, Will sat in his London office, reviewing reports from the trust administrators. Each child was thriving despite the upheaval. Anthony had joined a rival development firm, learning the business from the ground up. The twins were excelling in college, their athletic scholarships supplemented by the trust. Emma had thrown herself into music, finding solace in piano competitions. Michael, the youngest, was showing promise in economics. His phone lit up with a message from Anthony. "Dad, can we talk?" The video call connected, showing his eldest son in a corporate setting much like his own. "The trust statements came today," Anthony said. "What you did, protecting our futures even after learning we weren't yours." "Biology doesn't make a father," Will replied simply. "Actions do." Over the next few months, each child reached out individually. The twins called from college, their initial anger transformed into understanding. Emma sent recordings of her piano performances, each dedicated to the father who had chosen to love her regardless of DNA. Michael's economics essays always found their way to Will's inbox, seeking the guidance he'd never stopped providing. Meanwhile, Jackie's careful world had crumbled completely. Her lover faced criminal charges. Her sister had turned against her, their final confrontation in family court revealing the hollow core of their decades-long deception. "You promised me ironclad property transfers," Jackie had screamed at Loretta during the hearing. "You promised me protection from ethics investigations," Loretta shot back. "Now look at us, you've lost everything, and my career is destroyed. Was it worth it, sister?" The judge's ruling was decisive. Every property would remain in the trust Will had created. Jackie's attempts to claim fraud were dismissed, her own deception used as evidence against her. Will received the final confirmation of his victory on a crisp London morning, 5 letters, one from each child, arriving together as if orchestrated by fate. Anthony wrote of lessons in integrity learned from watching his father's response to betrayal. The twins spoke of understanding true strength through Will's actions. Emma's letter was stained with tears as she thanked him for showing her that love transcends biology. Michael, analytical even in emotion, outlined how Will's ethical choices had shaped his own worldview. Will's response to each was the same simple truth. Family isn't built on blood or buildings, but on truth and trust. In Greenwich, the Tudor mansion stood empty, its windows dark. Jackie lived in a small apartment now, her social standing destroyed, her children distant, her carefully constructed world of properties and prestige collapsed like the house of cards it had always been. Mark Thompson faced his own demons in a courtroom, his professional reputation ruined, his practice destroyed, his freedom threatened by mounting criminal charges. His attempts to blame Jackie for manipulating him fell flat against the evidence of his own systematic fraud. Loretta, barred from practicing law, watched her client list evaporate as news of her ethical violations spread through Greenwich's elite circles. Former clients questioned every transaction, every document she had ever handled. But in London, Will Elliott was building again. His new developments rose against the city skyline, each project a testament to honest foundation and ethical practice. The empire he had built once from nothing grew stronger, built this time on truth instead of lies. The children flourished under the trust provisions, each finding their path while holding to the ethical standards their mother and aunt had ignored. They understood now what Will had taught them through actions rather than words, that integrity matters more than inheritance, that truth matters more than titles, that family is built on choices rather than chromosomes. In the end, Mark, Jackie, and Loretta's elaborate scheme to build a fortune through deception had collapsed, while Will's honest foundation endured through the children he had chosen to protect, regardless of DNA. The truth, like the properties they had schemed so long to acquire, had found its rightful home. Epilogue: 5 years later. The modest 2-bedroom apartment in a middle-class neighborhood of Greenwich bore little resemblance to the Tudor mansion Jackie Elliott once called home. At 50, her carefully maintained beauty had taken on a brittle quality. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by off-the-rack business, where suitable for her new position as a real estate agent's assistant, the only job her tainted reputation allowed her to secure. The irony wasn't lost on her. After 20 years of manipulating property transfers, she now filed paperwork for other people's real estate dreams. Her phone buzzed a reminder about tomorrow's parole hearing. Mark Thompson, once the prestigious fertility specialist who had been her partner in deception, was eligible for early release after serving 3 years of his 5-year sentence for medical fraud. Jackie deleted the reminder. She hadn't visited Mark once during his incarceration. His betrayal, claiming she had manipulated him when the fraud charges came down, had been the final twist of the knife in her carefully constructed plans. The local newspaper on her coffee table carried a familiar name. Elliott International opens landmark development in Dubai. The article featured a photo of Will, still commanding and distinguished at 60, cutting a ribbon at a gleaming new complex. Beside him stood Anthony, now 26, and serving as the company's head of international development. Jackie's hand trembled as she turned the page. She hadn't spoken to any of her children in years. Their trust funds, meticulously structured by Will, ensured they never needed to contact her. The ethical compliance requirements Will had built into the trust meant they had to maintain not just professional success, but moral integrity, a final lesson from the father who had chosen to protect them despite biology. Across town, in a federal prison's minimum security wing, Mark Thompson sat in his cell, reviewing the paperwork for his upcoming parole hearing. His medical license was permanently revoked, his practice destroyed, his reputation ruined. The criminal charges for medical fraud had been just the beginning. Civil lawsuits from 38 families affected by his fertility clinic scheme had stripped him of every asset. His ex-wife Caroline had divorced him immediately after the scandal broke, taking what remained of their savings. Their country club membership, his position on hospital boards, his speaking engagements at medical conferences, all gone, replaced by an orange jumpsuit and a 6x8 cell. The guard delivered his mail, another letter from his attorney about upcoming civil proceedings. Even after serving time for criminal charges, the lawsuits kept coming as more families discovered the truth about their children's parentage. In a small office in New Jersey, Loretta Elliott, now using her maiden name, worked as a paralegal, the highest position her disbarment allowed. Her once lucrative legal career had ended in disgrace. The malpractice suits from former clients had bankrupted her, forcing the sale of her home and liquidation of her investments. She hadn't spoken to Jackie since their explosive confrontation in family court 3 years ago. Their last exchange still burned in her memory. "You promised me those property transfers were bulletproof," Jackie had screamed. "You promised me Mark's scheme would never be discovered," Loretta had shot back. "Now we both lost everything." The prestigious law firm she'd built over decades had collapsed overnight. Former clients, questioning every document she'd ever handled, had filed a cascade of malpractice suits. The legal community she'd once dominated now shunned her completely. Meanwhile, in London's Canary Wharf, Will Elliott surveyed his expanding empire from his penthouse office. Elliott International had tripled in size over the past 5 years, with developments across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Each project was built on the principles he'd learned the hard way: integrity, transparency, and truth. Anthony entered without knocking, comfortable in his role as both son and executive. Dubai numbers exceeded projections. "The twins want to know if you're coming to their MBA graduation next month." Will smiled. Daniel and David, now 24, had inherited his business acumen, if not his genes. Both were completing their MBAs at Harvard, their athletic scholarships supplemented by the trust he'd created. "Wouldn't miss it," Will replied. "How's Emma's concert tour going?" "Selling out venues across Europe. The critics are calling her a piano prodigy." Anthony pulled up a review on his tablet. "Michael's starting his economics doctorate at Oxford in the fall." Will nodded, pride evident in his expression. Each child had found their path. Their success built on the foundation of ethical choices he'd established through the trust. His phone lit up with a news alert. Former fertility specialist Mark Thompson faces parole board. Will closed the notification without reading further. Thompson's fate had ceased to interest him years ago. The trust administrator's latest report sat on his desk. Each child's progress was meticulously documented, their adherence to the ethical requirements carefully monitored. The properties Jackie had schemed to acquire remained safely held in trust, their value grown under professional management. Emma's latest concert recording played softly in the background as Will reviewed development plans for a new project in Singapore. At 22, his daughter had transformed her childhood piano lessons into a flourishing career as a classical pianist. Her performances often included pieces about family, truth, and redemption themes that resonated deeply with her audience. Michael, the youngest at 20, had perhaps been most affected by the revelations about his origins. He'd channeled that pain into academic excellence, focusing on ethical economics and sustainable development. His doctoral thesis proposal examined the intersection of business ethics and family governance, a subject he understood all too well. The twins had taken different paths to the same destination. Daniel focused on sustainable development, while David specialized in ethical investment strategies. Together, they were developing new models for responsible real estate development, building on Will's legacy while forging their own. Anthony had surprised everyone by declining a direct position in Elliott International after the scandal broke. Instead, he'd worked his way up through a competitor firm, proving himself on merit alone before accepting Will's offer to lead international development. A soft knock interrupted Will's thoughts. His assistant entered with a stack of letters, the quarterly updates each child sent, a tradition they'd maintained since the truth came out. Anthony's letter detailed not just business successes, but personal growth, describing how he'd helped another family navigate a complex ethical situation using lessons learned from Will. The twins wrote jointly, their letter full of plans for implementing ethical business practices in real estate development, each proposal reflecting Will's influence. Emma's letter included a USB drive with her latest recording, a piece she'd composed about chosen family and enduring love, dedicated to the father who had protected her future. Michael's analytical mind shone through his letter, examining the long-term implications of ethical business practices while expressing gratitude for Will's unwavering moral compass. In Greenwich, Jackie's attempts to rebuild her social life had failed completely. Former friends crossed the street to avoid her. Country club memberships were mysteriously unavailable. Charity boards had no openings. The social circles she'd once dominated now treated her as a cautionary tale. Her small apartment's walls were decorated with photos of her children, all from before the truth came out. She hadn't been invited to Daniel and David's college graduation, hadn't seen Emma perform live, missed Michael's academic achievements. Anthony's business success she learned about only through news articles. Mark Thompson's parole hearing ended with conditional release granted, but freedom offered little comfort. At 62, his professional life was over. No hospital would grant him privileges. No insurance company would cover him. The medical fraud conviction and subsequent civil judgments had left him penniless. His online dating profile, disgraced former Dr. Seek's companion, attracted only true crime enthusiasts wanting to interview him for podcasts about medical fraud. Loretta's attempt to rebuild her life in New Jersey had achieved modest success, but the stigma of disbarment followed her everywhere. Job interviews ended abruptly when background checks revealed her history. Social media kept the scandal alive, with legal ethics classes using her case as a warning example. Will's new life in London flourished. His relationship with the children grew stronger, built on chosen bonds rather than biological ones. The ethical requirements he'd built into the trust had shaped them into people of integrity and principle. The Tudor mansion in Greenwich, now managed by the trust, stood as a monument to failed deception. Its grounds were maintained, its windows washed, but it remained empty, a reminder that empires built on lies eventually crumble. Jackie drove past it sometimes, remembering the life she'd thrown away. Each property she'd schemed to acquire now served a purpose she'd never intended, ensuring her children's future while teaching them the value of ethical behavior. The fertility clinic where Mark Thompson had conducted his fraud had been converted into a medical ethics training center. His case was studied by students learning about professional responsibility and the consequences of betraying patient trust. Loretta's former law office became a compliance consulting firm, its new owners specializing in detecting and preventing the kind of fraud she had facilitated. Will's London office displayed no family photos, no mementos of his previous life. Instead, the walls held architectural drawings of future developments, each one representing honest growth and ethical success. The children's trust continued to grow, managed according to the principles Will had established. Each property Jackie had acquired through deception now generated income for charitable causes, funding scholarships and ethics education programs. Anthony's corner office in Dubai overlooked a city rising from the desert, much like his own rise from the ashes of family deception. The twins' innovative approach to ethical development attracted international attention, their Harvard professors using their work as case studies in sustainable growth. Emma's music carried her around the world, her concerts selling out in venues where Jackie now couldn't afford tickets. Michael's academic work earned accolades, his fresh perspective on ethical economics inspiring a new generation of business leaders. The final irony of Jackie's scheme lay in its unintended outcome. The properties she'd acquired through deception became instruments of ethical education, teaching her children, and through them, others, that true success comes from integrity, not manipulation. Will's empire, rebuilt on honest foundations, stood as testament to the power of ethical choice over biological bonds. The children, though not his by blood, carried forward his principles, their success measured not in properties acquired, but in lives touched and values upheld. Mark Thompson's medical fraud scheme, intended to enrich him through deception, instead became a watershed case in medical ethics reform. The families affected by his fertility clinic fraud had formed support groups, turning personal pain into advocacy for stronger oversight of reproductive medicine. Loretta's legal disgrace led to significant reforms in property law and ethical oversight of real estate transactions. Her case was required reading in law school ethics classes, teaching future attorneys about the consequences of betraying professional trust. And Jackie, the architect of a 20-year scheme to acquire properties through calculated pregnancies, found herself living in a rented apartment, filing paperwork for other people's real estate transactions, watching from a distance as her children thrived under the ethical guidance of the man she had betrayed. The truth, as Will had known it would, had found its way home. The properties Jackie had schemed to acquire served their intended purpose, after all, not as her personal wealth, but as the foundation for teaching her children that family, like success, must be built on truth and trust to endure. Will's simple response to his children's letters never varied. Family isn't built on blood or buildings, but on the choices we make and the principles we uphold. The empire he'd rebuilt stood as proof that success, like family, flourishes best when rooted in truth. The children he'd chosen to protect, regardless of DNA, carried that lesson forward, their lives testament to the enduring power of ethical choice over biological chance. Mark, Jackie, and Loretta's elaborate scheme to build a fortune through deception had indeed collapsed like the house of cards it always was. But from its ruins rose something far more valuable, a legacy of integrity that would outlast any property empire. The truth, as it turned out, had many properties indeed. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.